The first thing Mara understood was that this ship breathed wrong. Air should cycle in a steady hush. Here, the vents pulsed, 2 quick pushes, a pause, then a longer drag, as if the hull itself was anxious. The deck under her cheek was cold enough to sting, and it carried a strained vibration that didn't match any civilian hauler she'd ever crawled through back on Kestrel Ridge. Her wrists were bound behind her with polymer ties. She flexed once, gently. The edges bit. She tested again, slower, learning where it gave and where it held. Boots argued somewhere above her. Human, one voice said, bright with greed. Fresh. High value. Another answered, older, amused. Everything is high value until it costs more than it earns. A hard light snapped on. White. Clinical. A figure stepped into view. He was tall, wrapped in a dark hooded cloak. Under it sat a battered plate carrier crammed with pouches and straps. A small red-white-blue patch was stitched to his chest. His face was a skull mask, matte black and gunmetal, with blue lenses glowing where eyes should be. He crouched by her as if time belonged to him. "What is your name?" he asked. Mara swallowed. The air tasted of disinfectant and hot metal, with a sweet chemical note underneath. She made her voice even. "Mara. Just Mara. That's what people call me." "People." He rose smoothly. "I am Captain Vesk Ralcor. You are cargo on my deck." "Cargo answers." Mara lifted her head as far as the ties allowed and looked past him. The holding bay was a stack of cages welded into a modular grid. Some were empty. Some held shapes huddled in the dim. Too still, too quiet. Cameras watched from ceiling corners. A child-sized silhouette pressed to bars on the far row and didn't make a sound. Vesk followed her gaze. "A marketplace. You will be appreciated." A thin alien in a stained coat approached with a scanner, hands shaking. "Captain, I should check for implants." "Do your work," Vesk said, eyes never leaving Mara. "Where did I take you from?" "A colony." "Which one?" "Kestrel Ridge." The scanner chirped as the medic swept it over her. Mara didn't flinch. Vesk tilted his head. "Occupation." Useful meant expensive. Expensive meant attention. She chose the smallest truth. "Apprentice mechanic." Interest tightened in the captain's posture. "Family?" "Yes." "Money?" Mara let a beat pass. "Work." The medic peered at his readout. No implants. No internal tags. Local registry, unknown. Vesk's stillness changed. Not panic. Calculation. Unknown. "Not in our caches," the medic stammered. "She's clean." Clean meant unclaimed. It also meant the slavers could write her future in ink that wasn't theirs. Vesk stepped closer. "You look me in the eyes when you should be crying." Mara met the blue glow without blinking. "Crying doesn't loosen knots." A guard behind Vesk snorted. "Humans always talk big." Vesk lifted 2 fingers. The guard went silent. "Good," the captain said. "Spirit cells." 2 guards hauled her up. The ties cut into her wrists as her shoulders wrenched back, and she hissed once despite herself. The nearest guard leaned in, breath sour. "Try anything and you lose fingers." Mara didn't look at his face. She looked at his belt, a keycard on a retractable coil, edges worn from constant use. They shoved her into a cage with a perforated metal floor. The door sealed with a magnetic clack that shivered up her teeth. From the adjacent cage, a whisper slid through the bars. "Human." Mara turned her head. A slim captive with pale scales and wide, sleepless eyes stared back. "Young. Scared." "Yes," Mara whispered. "Name?" he asked. "Mara." He hesitated. "Torin." Mara nodded. "How long until the next stop?" Torin blinked, startled by the question itself. "Quiet zone," he whispered. "Soon. They sell there." Soon meant hours, not days. Enough time for routines to settle. Enough time to watch. Across the aisle, an older captive sat with his back to the bars, eyes half-lidded as if sleep could be summoned on command. When Mara's gaze touched him, He opened one eye and gave a tiny shake of his head. "Don't be noticed." She answered with a slow blink. "Understood." The ship breathed again. 2 short pulses, then the long draw. A faint click came late, like a tired relay. Mara followed the sound to a panel seam near the ceiling where condensation beaded and froze. Maintenance access. Someone would open it, because machines demanded always care. She counted the seconds between breaths, then between footsteps, and let the numbers settle into place. Later, the bay lights dimmed to amber. A hatch opened and a crewman rolled in a cart of ration bricks. He tossed one into Mara's cage like feeding an animal. The crewman lingered, eyes on her. "You really a mechanic?" Mara didn't answer. He shrugged. "Captain says you're worth trouble." "Trouble for who?" Mara asked. He grinned. "Not us." Footsteps returned. The guard straightened. Vesk came back, cloak trailing like shadow. He stopped at Mara's cage and rested a gloved knuckle against the bars. "Tomorrow," he said, "buyers will inspect." Mara kept her face flat. "And if they don't like what they see?" "Then they will reshape you until you fit," Vesk replied, as calmly as if discussing cargo dimensions. A chill tried to rise in Mara's spine. She forced it down. "What do you want from me, Captain?" Vesk leaned in, voice lowered to something almost intimate. "Your full name." Mara's mouth went dry. Her mother's rule echoed, steady as a heartbeat. "Never give a predator your map." "You already have it," Mara said. "No," Vesk murmured. "You gave me what people call you. I asked what you are." He straightened and turned away. "Sleep, Mara. Tomorrow, you become someone else's problem." When the bay finally went dark, Mara lay on the cold metal and listened to the ship breathe, wrong, strained, vulnerable. In the silence, she whispered her last name once, only to herself. "Calder." Mara learned the Karens do the way she'd learned broken machines back home, by listening to what it tried to hide. The holding deck had patterns. The lights shifted on a schedule that pretended to mimic day and night, but the ship's body betrayed itself in tiny stutters. The brief sag in power before the amber cycle, the faint cough in the vents when the scrubbers overworked, the way the deck plating warmed near the left wall because a conduit ran too hot beneath it. Guards changed every 4 hours. Not because they were kind enough to rest, but because boredom made them sloppy and slavers couldn't afford sloppy. The first shift was quiet, rifles held close, eyes hard, mouths shut. The second shift talked, joked, leaned on cages. The third shift always brought food late, as if punishment could be measured in minutes. By the second day, Mara could tell who was approaching from the sound alone. Heavy boots meant Brig, the one who liked threats. The lighter steps belonged to the lanky guard who smelled of spice and chewed something bitter. The captain's stride didn't hurry. It arrived like gravity. She stopped pleading early. Pleading invited performances. Instead she watched. When the ration cart came, she ate half and saved half, tucking the rest into the corner where the floor met the bars. Hunger was bad. Weakness was worse. Across the aisle, Torrin pressed his face to the cage when the guards weren't looking. "They said quiet zone," he whispered, voice thin as wire. "They dock. They show us." Mara kept her eyes on the ceiling camera, tracking its slow pivot. "How long?" Torrin's throat bobbed. "A day. Maybe less." "Have you seen the auction bay?" He shook his head quickly, then glanced away as if the memory hurt. "I heard screams. Not killing. Testing." Mara's jaw tightened. The slavers didn't need corpses. Corpses didn't pay. In the far cage, the older captive finally spoke on the third day. He waited until the guard's footsteps faded, then slid closer, careful to stay out of the camera's best angle. "You're thinking," he said softly. Mara turned her head. His face was lined, but his eyes were sharp in the low light. "I always think." "That's dangerous here," he replied. "Dangerous for you. Dangerous for everyone near you." Mara studied him the way she studied tools, checking for the parts that mattered. "Name." He hesitated, then decided it was worth the risk. "Elias." She nodded once. "How do you know this place?" I traded through the chain. Before I was cargo. His mouth twisted. I used to believe neutrality meant safety. Mara's wrists still burned under the ties that had been replaced twice, each time tightened as if pain could erase stubbornness. Then tell me what happens in the quiet zone. Elias exhaled slowly. Buyers inspect. Contracts get signed. The ship gets paid. The captives disappear into compartments and into accounts. Mara kept her voice low. What if a buyer wants to bargain with family? Elias gave a humorless laugh. That depends on the family. Mara didn't answer. She didn't have to. The Calders didn't bargain. She made herself a new rule. Never lie unless the lie built time. Time was material. Time could be bent into tools. That afternoon, the ship's breathing faltered harder than usual. 2 pulses, a pause, then a long drag that shuddered at the end. A faint rattle came from above the cages, followed by a metallic tap-tap like something loose vibrating in protest. Maintenance. A hatch opened near the far corner and 3 crewmen climbed down with a toolkit and a portable light. They spoke in irritated bursts, complaining about scrubber strain and cheap parts. Mara didn't stare. Staring got you noticed. She watched through her eyelashes, counting how long it took them to remove the panel, which screws they left in place, how the camera angle shifted when they stepped into its blind spot. One of them cursed as his glove snagged. He yanked it free, exposing a strip of pale skin at his wrist. A scar line, old and jagged. Someone who worked near engines too long. Someone careless. He slapped the panel back into place without checking the seal. The tap-tap returned immediately, quieter, but persistent. Mara smiled faintly to herself. A bad seal was a gift. That night, Brig returned with the ration cart, more irritated than usual. You'll eat fast tomorrow, he grunted. Captain wants you pretty. Mara lifted her head. Tomorrow. Brig's eyes narrowed. Quiet zone approach. Will you be selling all of us? Mara asked, keeping her tone neutral. Brig snorted. Depends who pays. Elias shifted closer to his bars. And if someone doesn't pay? Brig's grin showed too many teeth. Then they get quiet. Mara watched him leave, memorizing the sway of his keycard coil. It bounced against his thigh as he walked, and the little clack of it against metal sounded like a countdown. Later, Torrin whispered, Human, why aren't you scared? Mara didn't look at him. I am. Torrin's breath hitched. Then why? Because if I act scared, Mara said, they'll use it. Silence settled, full of other captives breathing, full of tiny restrained noises. The holding deck smelled of sweat and disinfectant and old fear soaked into steel seams. Mara closed her eyes and pictured the salvage yard back home. Old drone shells stacked like bones. Sunlight on dust. The comfort of familiar broken things. Then she forced herself to picture her mother's hands instead. Grease under nails, steady grip, eyes that never softened when danger wore a smile. If they take you, her mother had said once, you don't need a hero. You need a signal. Mara had laughed then, young enough to believe it was only a story. Now she replayed every word with brutal clarity. In the false dawn lighting cycle, the ship jolted slightly. Not turbulence. Ships didn't jolt in vacuum. Docking alignment. External clamps kissing hull. Voices rose beyond the holding deck, sharp and excited. Quiet zone, someone yelled. Anchor set. The guards returned in doubled numbers. They pulled captives from cages in groups, fastening collars and restraints. The air shifted with movement, with raised voices, with the electric edge of something about to happen. Mara's cage door opened. Brig grabbed her arm, hauling her out. The ties were cut, replaced with magnetic cuffs that clicked shut around her wrists and ankles. You hurt her, you pay, he warned another guard. She's not yours, the other replied. Brig shoved Mara forward. Not yet. Mara stumbled deliberately once, just enough to feel the cuff's limits, to gauge their weight. The magnet held firm. No easy slip. No cheap hinge. They marched her down a corridor that smelled cleaner than the holding bay, past sealed doors and a grated vent that exhaled warm air. The ship's pulse sounded different here, Sharper, like higher pressure. She tracked it instinctively. The scrubber core had to be nearby. At the end of the corridor, an inspection chamber waited. Bright lights. Smooth floor. A metal chair bolted to the deck. 2 cameras. One angled slightly too high. A clerk stood near a console, wearing a coat too fine for this ship. His skin was grey-blue, his fingers long, his eyes quick as he scanned her. Human female, he said, voice bored. 15. 16. 15, Mara answered. He flicked his gaze to his screen. No registry tags. No ownership mark. Captain wants provenance. Vesk entered as if summoned by the mention. Hood shadowing his mask, cloak trailing behind him. He didn't look at the clerk. He looked at Mara like she was a puzzle he intended to solve with force. Proceed, Vesk said. The clerk cleared his throat. Name for contract. Mara stayed still. Her heartbeat pushed against her ribs, hard but controlled. She remembered her mother's warning. Names weren't just sounds. They were coordinates. The clerk repeated, impatient. Name. Mara, she said. The clerk's eyes narrowed. Full designation. Vesk's glowing gaze pinned her. Give it, he said, calm as ice. Mara felt the trap closing. If she refused, they would hurt her until she complied. If she complied later, it would be in screams, not in choice. Choice mattered. Even here. So she chose the moment. She lifted her chin, looked directly at the nearest camera, and spoke clearly enough to cut through steel. Mara Calder. The clerk froze mid-keystroke. One guard near the door went still, as if his joints locked. Another whispered something under his breath, too fast to catch, but it sounded like a superstition. Vesk didn't move at first. Then, slowly, his head tilted. Calder, he repeated. Not as a question. As recognition. And in that instant, the room felt smaller, like the ship itself had begun to hold its breath. The Karen's due changed after the name. Not in any way Mara could point at and prove. No alarms, no announcement, no sudden violence in the corridors. The shift lived in glances that lingered too long, in conversations that died when she walked past, in the way guards began touching their weapons as if metal could keep superstition away. They hauled her out of the inspection chamber and marched her back toward the holding deck, but the escorts moved differently now. No jokes. No lazy swagger. Their steps were quick and clipped, like they wanted distance from her without admitting it. Brigg muttered as they passed a sealed hatch. Should have kept her mouth shut. The other guard shot him a sharp look. You didn't hear the stories. Stories are for children, Brigg snapped, then lowered his voice anyway. Still. Calder. That name gets ships burned. Mara didn't smile. She didn't smirk. She kept her face blank and let them talk. Fear made mouths loose. They threw her back into her cage. The door clanged shut with unnecessary force. Torrin scrambled close, eyes wide. What did you do? Nothing, Mara whispered. I told the truth. Elias slid into view from his cage, careful and pale. You said your family name, he murmured. Mara met his gaze through the bars. They were going to take it from me anyway. Elias held her look for a long second, then nodded once, slow. Then we're on a clock. What clock? Torrin demanded. Elias didn't answer him. His attention stayed on Mara. If that name means what I think it means, your captors won't try to sell you now. Mara's throat tightened. They'll hide me. Or kill you, Elias said bluntly. Some men would rather erase a mistake than pay for it. Mara looked away before Torrin could see the flicker of fear she couldn't fully crush. Then we move first. The holding deck lights changed to a harsh red an hour later. A siren didn't sound. It didn't need to. The ship's mood turned sharp and cutting all on its own. Bulkhead doors boomed shut in distant corridors. Footsteps multiplied. The air thickened with the static bite of weapons powering up. Vesk's voice came through a speaker mounted above the cages, amplified and cold. All crew, lockdown protocol. No external transmissions. No unapproved movement. Anyone spreading panic will be spaced with the rest of the refuse. The last words weren't aimed at the crew. They were aimed at the captives. Mara heard it in the way the phrase refuse landed. Brig arrived with 2 more guards, all of them helmeted now. He paced the aisle like a predator trying to convince himself he still had control. "You," he barked at Mara. "Hands forward." Mara extended her wrists, letting the cuffs click against the bars. He stared at them for a beat as if expecting the metal to melt. "You think you're special," he spat. Mara kept her voice calm. "You're the one acting special." Brig's jaw twitched. He turned away like her words burned. When the guards moved on, Elias whispered, "They've sealed the deck." Mara listened. The ship's breathing pattern was faster now. Short push, long pull, stressed. She felt the vibration under her bare feet through the perforated floor. "They're pulling power from somewhere," she murmured. Torrin pressed his forehead to the bars. "Are they going to hurt us?" Elias's mouth thinned. "They might. Fear doesn't stay contained." Mara stared at the ceiling panel seam she'd been watching for days. Maintenance would still happen. Machines didn't respect threats. The scrubber damage didn't disappear because men were scared. She waited. Time passed in the worst way, slow enough to stretch, fast enough to steal chances. A few captives sobbed quietly. Someone prayed in a language Mara didn't know. Somewhere farther down the row, a guard struck a cage with the butt of his weapon and shouted for silence. Then, finally, came the sound she'd been waiting for. A faint rattle above the cage grid. A loose tap, a delayed click. The ship's breath hiccuped. Maintenance again. A hatch opened in the far corner. 2 crewmen climbed down, stiff with anxiety. Their portable lamp swept the ceiling panels, making shadows jump like animals. They spoke in low bursts, angry, scared, urgent. "Scrubbers dropping. It'll drop harder if we don't fix it. Captain wants all hands on weapons. And he wants oxygen too, doesn't he?" Mara shifted carefully, keeping her movement small. She watched them reach for the same panel as before. Watched the camera angle flicker when the light passed under it. Watched the moment the corridor feed stuttered as power rerouted. There. That tiny blink. She didn't need freedom. She needed position. Mara forced a cough, deep, ragged, ugly. Then another. She folded forward, shoulders shaking. Torrin hissed, "Mara?" Mara let her eyes roll back. She collapsed to the floor, hitting hard enough to sound real. She tasted metal instantly. The pain sharpened her focus. Brig heard it and stomped over. "What now?" "She's choking," one guard said, uncertain. Brig cursed. "Med bay's busy. Open it." The door unsealed with a buzz. Brig yanked Mara up by the arm. Mara went limp on purpose, letting her weight drag. He grunted, hauling her toward the aisle gap near the maintenance corner, toward the hot conduit line she'd marked, toward the weak seam above the cage grid. "Get her breathing," Brig snapped. "If she dies, the captain." He didn't finish. His own fear finished the sentence. They propped her against a support beam while a crewman fumbled for a stim patch. The portable maintenance light swung, scattering glare across steel. Mara kept her face slack. Her chest rose shallowly, controlled. She listened to the footsteps, the whispered arguments, the distant clack of another bulkhead ceiling. The camera above her rotated. Not fully. The lens had a blind spot, one thin wedge of shadow tucked behind the beam. Mara moved. Fast. Quiet. She rolled into that shadow and reached up, fingers finding the seam she'd studied until it lived in her bones. The panel latch was cheap. Cheap meant predictable. She slipped 2 fingers into the gap and pulled. The panel gave a millimeter. She pulled again, harder. A soft pop. Cold air spilled from the duct like a sigh. "Mara." Torrin's whisper came sharp and terrified from behind. "What are you doing?" She didn't answer. Speech wasted oxygen. She hooked her fingers into the opening and climbed, using the beam as leverage. Pain shot through her ribs from the earlier fall, but she ignored it. Pain was a message. She didn't have time to read it. Inside the duct, the world narrowed. Metal pressed close on both sides, slick with condensation. Frost glittered along the edges. The ship's vibration hummed through her palms, louder here, like she was inside the ribs of something alive. Below, voices rose. Where'd she go? Find her. Boots scraped. Weapons clicked. The portable lamp swung wildly. Mara crawled forward, elbows and knees grinding against the cold. Every sound felt enormous. Every breath sounded borrowed. She counted turns by memory. Left at the junction, straight past the warmer section, then down toward the comm relay corridor. She couldn't see the map, but she had built one in her head from vibration patterns, from heat lines, from the direction of airflow. A shot cracked below, someone firing into the duct grating. Sparks burst, sizzling, and Mara flinched as heat snapped past her legs. She didn't stop. She reached the first service grate and looked down. A narrow corridor ran beneath. 2 guards sprinted past, scanning, shouting. Their panic was so loud it made them blind. Mara dropped, landing hard on her feet. Her ankle twisted. Pain flared white. She bit down a cry and limped forward, forcing speed through shock. At the end of the corridor, a sealed comm panel waited. Reinforced casing, tamper alarm, security screws. Not built for captives. Built for crew. Mara pressed her ear to it. Heard the faint electrical whine inside. Power. Alive. She whispered the phrase her mother had drilled into her like a prayer and a weapon, and she prayed the universe still respected it. Child taken. Retrieval authorized. Her fingers found the diagnostic port below the casing. She jammed a bent maintenance pin into the slot the way she'd once bypassed a recycler lock back home. The panel lights flickered, angry, confused. Good. A channel opened for half a second. Mara leaned close to the MEC and spoke into the void, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Mara called her. Karen's due. Quiet zone perimeter. Holding deck, multiple captives. The indicator blinked once, then went dark. Behind her, boots thundered. Mara turned just as Brig rounded the corner, rifle raised, face twisted between fury and terror. You little. Mara grabbed the coolant valve beside the comm panel and ripped it open. Freezing mist erupted like a white explosion, swallowing the corridor in a violent cloud. Brig shouted, coughing, blind. His rifle fired once into nothing. Mara limped into the fog, disappearing as fast as she could move. She didn't know if the message reached anyone. She only knew it was out. And now, somewhere in the dark between stars, something human had heard the word Calder and begun to wake up. Then stop making it worse, Mara said quietly. Let them go. A laugh cut through the tension, slow, cold, and amused. Vesk emerged from the far end of the deck, cloak trailing behind him like spilled ink. His skull mask gleamed under the red lights, blue lenses burning. Impressive, he said. You returned to your herd. Mara didn't look away. It's not a herd. It's people. To you, Vesk replied, and tilted his head toward Elias. You care. That makes you easy to steer. He lifted a gloved hand. A guard shoved Elias forward, forcing him to balance on bound knees. Elias's eyes flicked to Mara, warning her without words. Vesk's voice lowered. You will walk with me. Mara's heartbeat slowed, not from calm but from cold understanding. Or what? Vesk leaned closer. Or I open the outer hatch and let the deck breathe vacuum. A murmur rippled through the crew. Even they didn't like that option. Mara measured the captain's posture, the angle of his hand, the positions of the guards. He wasn't bluffing. He was desperate enough to make an example of everyone, as long as it bought him a path out. Then the ship shuddered. Not a jolt. Not docking. A single heavy tremor, like something invisible had settled against the hull. Lights flickered once. Just once. A monitor on the wall beside Brig sparked, went black, then returned with a blank screen and one line of text in sharp white characters, translated automatically beneath in multiple scripts. Retrieval claim filed. Release the child. The words sat there like a verdict. Every sound died. Even Vesk stopped moving. Brig's voice came out cracked. Captain, did you see that? Vesk's mask turned toward the monitor, slow as a guillotine rising. Yes. Mara's chest tightened. They heard me. Another tremor rolled through the ship, this time followed by a dull thump somewhere deep in the hull, like a door being opened by someone who didn't ask permission. A crewman shouted from the corridor, panic shredding his voice. Escort frigate is dark. Their lights, everything, gone. Shut up, Vesk snapped. The crewman stumbled into view anyway, eyes wild. No explosion, Captain. They just turned off. Vesk's breathing sounded loud through his mask. Mara saw it then, the moment the Predator realized the cage door had opened. A voice came through the ship's internal speakers. Calm. Human. Close enough to feel. Captain Vesk Ralkor, it said. This vessel is under retrieval action. You have 60 seconds to release all captives and stand down. Vesk recovered faster than his crew. He grabbed Mara by the arm and hauled her toward the airlock corridor, dragging her like a shield. Guns lifted again, tracking shadows that weren't there. Mara's boot scraped, her ankle nearly buckled. She bit down the pain and watched his grip, watched the angle of the cuffs against her wrists. Vesk shoved her into a harness bolted near the airlock door. Straps cinched tight across her chest and shoulders, cutting her breath short. He turned on a camera feed and spoke into it, voice smooth as poison. Approach, and the girl dies. The speaker hissed softly. Understood. Vesk's posture stiffened. You understand. Good. Then you negotiate. No, the human voice replied. You misunderstood. The airlock controls blinked. Dead. Power severed cleanly. Vesk slapped the panel. Nothing. His head snapped up as if the ship itself had betrayed him. A new sound echoed down the corridor, soft steps. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Someone was walking toward them. Out of the darkness came figures in dark armor with white identifiers on their shoulders, moving with the silent precision of people who'd trained for one purpose and never questioned it. One of them raised a hand. A small device clicked. Mara's cuffs released with a sharp pop. The harness straps went slack. She fell forward, catching herself. The soldier closest to her caught her elbow, steadying her like she weighed nothing. Through a visor, a voice spoke low and sure. Mara called her. Identify. Mara's throat tightened so hard it hurt. She forced the words out. Mara. Calder. 15. The soldier's grip tightened, not to restrain, but to anchor. Confirmed, he said. You did good. Behind them, Vesk backed away, shaking. Wait, listen, there are others, buyers, routes, money. The human soldier turned his helmeted head toward him. You can explain it to a court, he said, voice flat as stone. You don't get to bargain with stolen children. Vesk opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Because in the corridor behind him, more human retrieval teams passed like shadows, heading for the holding deck, and the Karen's dew finally stopped breathing wrong. It breathed under control. Under human hands. And Mara, trembling in the soldier's grip, realized the truth the slavers had never understood. Humans didn't come for revenge. They came for what was theirs. ChatGPT can make. Then stop making it worse, Mara said quietly. Let them go. A laugh cut through the tension, slow, cold, and amused. Vesk emerged from the far end of the deck, cloak trailing behind him like spilled ink. His skull mask gleamed under the red lights, blue lenses burning. Impressive, he said. You return to your herd. Mara didn't look away. It's not a herd. It's people. To you, Vesk replied, and tilted his head toward Elias. You care. That makes you easy to steer. He lifted a gloved hand. A guard shoved Elias forward, forcing him to balance on bound knees. Elias's eyes flicked to Mara, warning her without words. Vesk's voice lowered. You will walk with me. Mara's heartbeat slowed, not from calm but from cold understanding. Or what? Vesk leaned closer. Or I open the outer hatch and let the deck breathe vacuum. A murmur rippled through the crew. Even they didn't like that option. Mara measured the captain's posture, the angle of his hand, the positions of the guards. He wasn't bluffing. He was desperate enough to make an example of everyone, as long as it bought him a path out. Then the ship shuddered. Not a jolt. Not docking. A single heavy tremor, like something invisible had settled against the hull. Lights flickered once. Just once. A monitor on the wall beside Briggs sparked, went black, then returned with a blank screen and one line of text in sharp white characters, translated automatically beneath in multiple scripts. Retrieval claim filed. Release the child. The words sat there like a verdict. Every sound died. Even Vesk stopped moving. Briggs' voice came out cracked. "Captain, did you see that?" Vesk's mask turned toward the monitor, slow as a guillotine rising. "Yes." Mara's chest tightened. "They heard me." Another tremor rolled through the ship, this time followed by a dull thump somewhere deep in the hull, like a door being opened by someone who didn't ask permission. A crewman shouted from the corridor, panic shredding his voice. "Escort frigate is dark. Their lights, everything, gone." "Shut up," Vesk snapped. The crewman stumbled into view anyway, eyes wild. "No explosion, Captain. They just turned off." Vesk's breathing sounded loud through his mask. Mara saw it then, the moment the Predator realized the cage door had opened. A voice came through the ship's internal speakers. "Calm. Human. Close enough to feel. Captain Vesk Ralkor," it said. "This vessel is under retrieval action. You have 60 seconds to release all captives and stand down." Vesk recovered faster than his crew. He grabbed Mara by the arm and hauled her toward the airlock corridor, dragging her like a shield. Guns lifted again, tracking shadows that weren't there. Mara's boots scraped, her ankle nearly buckled. She bit down the pain and watched his grip, watched the angle of the cuffs against her wrists. Vesk shoved her into a harness bolted near the airlock door. Straps cinched tight across her chest and shoulders, cutting her breath short. He turned on a camera feed and spoke into it, voice smooth as poison. "Approach, and the girl dies." The speaker hissed softly. "Understood." Vesk's posture stiffened. "You understand? Good. Then you negotiate." "No," the human voice replied. "You misunderstood." The airlock controls blinked. Dead. Power severed cleanly. Vesk slapped the panel. Nothing. His head snapped up as if the ship itself had betrayed him. A new sound echoed down the corridor, soft steps. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Someone was walking toward them. Out of the darkness came figures in dark armor with white identifiers on their shoulders, moving with the silent precision of people who'd trained for one purpose and never questioned it. One of them raised a hand. A small device clicked. Mara's cuffs released with a sharp pop. The harness straps went slack. She fell forward, catching herself. The soldier closest to her caught her elbow, steadying her like she weighed nothing. Through a visor, a voice spoke low and sure. Mara called her. "Identify." Mara's throat tightened so hard it hurt. She forced the words out. "Mara. Calder. 15. The soldier's grip tightened, not to restrain, but to anchor. "Confirmed," he said. "You did good." Behind them, Vesk backed away, shaking. "Wait, listen, there are others, buyers, routes, money." The human soldier turned his helmeted head toward him. "You can explain it to a court," he said, voice flat as stone. "You don't get to bargain with stolen children." Vesk opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Because in the corridor behind him, more human retrieval teams passed like shadows, heading for the holding deck, and the Karen's dew finally stopped breathing wrong. It breathed under control. Under human hands. And Mara, trembling in the soldier's grip, realized the truth the slavers had never understood. Humans didn't come for revenge. They came for what was theirs. ChatGPT can make